Now you can search for new episodes by subject matter at londonreal.tv. Brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform we use at London Real.
A lot of times when people feel challenged, when their religious beliefs are challenged or their sense of superiority is challenged, that instead of looking more deeply and accepting a lot of the limitations and broadening their worldview, they end up blocking and then projecting out. So we see that most horrifically in World War II, where it's the Jews are the evil and the Germans are all good, and they're projecting their shadow out on others. So I think the work of psychedelics, the work of becoming more mature, is the work that our culture needs to do in order to face the challenges that we have. And we don't have a lot of emotional tools to facilitate that process. And that's where I think the emergence of this psychedelic renaissance, where now research is permitted again. There's more research now than at any time since the late 1960s,
right,
with psychedelics. And I think it's very promising. And at the same time, what we're hoping to do is to show people, and this is where I would say I differ with Terence McKenna.
Okay.
So that Terence had this idea that somehow or other, these ideas that are catalyzed by psychedelics are inherently corrosive to ordered systems of government and ordered society. That we're always going to be tearing down the old and building the new, and that there's going to be a tension between the existing society and the sort of psychedelic scouts,
okay,
the psychonauts that go out to explore consciousness, and that there would be this inevitable suppression and tension. And that was kind of the view in the 60s too.
Right.
And so I think what I'm trying to demonstrate, and what I believe a lot of people are able to live out through their lives, is that people can have these psychedelic experiences and return home to their families and their work, and that they don't have to go off live on some remote island, or that we can have these awarenesses and live in society, and we can have a society where it's a healthier society, challenging its assumptions but growing in an organic way, and that the psychedelics will be an essential tool
right,
for that. And if we look at the spread of ayahuasca throughout the Western world right now, not only as a tool for religious ceremonies and spiritual ceremonies, but also in kind of more quasi-therapeutic contexts, we see it's like with the gay rights movement, where people always knew gay people, they just didn't know they knew gay people. And
right,
once gay people started stepping out, then you think, wow, you can actually be, more or less normal, healthy, happy person and be gay. So it's like that now with psychedelics, but we're behind the curve. So that if the people in England who had taken ayahuasca or psychedelics and were making major contributions to society could just raise their hands, people would be shocked.
Yeah, and I've heard this from many guests that have come on here, and the advice has been, and it might have been it was yours last time you were here.
Yeah.
You said come out of the psychedelic closet, and it's something I have tried to do in the last couple of years, and it's been difficult every step of the way for me. It's just because you think that there's no going back. You think I used to work in the banking world. There's no way they're letting me back. Yeah. But the more I come out, the more, the percentage of guests that have sat in that chair that have either tried ayahuasca or are going to try it is shockingly high.
Yeah.
And we had 6-time Mr. Olympia Dorian Yates, considered one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. And an hour into the show, we're talking to him, and he's like, I drank ayahuasca when I was in Brazil, and I smoked DMT all the time. And, our jaws dropped. I have a UFC fighter in here, Dan Hardy, and he is talking about how it's an important part of him as a fighter, taking these psychedelic drugs. And, it's the opposite of what you would expect, especially if you think it's this tune-out society, he can use it and also still punch people's heads for a living, and it's very complementary to his life.
It also sort of questions challenges the idea that this is all about peace and love, and that you have these experiences, then we all become sort of naive, defenseless people that the real hardcore is going to take advantage of.
Right.
So it's not that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is not that way. And there are some of the veterans, that work with MDMA to deal with the trauma of what happened to them during the war. And so part of the concern was, is everybody going to become sort of a peace-loving, disarmament now kind of person? And we don't find that either.
Right.
Although we do find, I think, that many of the people who have been in our studies with veterans with PTSD, as a result of the MDMA working through the traumas of being involved with friends getting killed and killing people, that they become more willing to postpone military action until the last resort. They don't become pacifists. At least we've not seen anybody really become a pacifist. But what they do say is that as they develop their ability to navigate their own emotions, that conflicts that previously would reach a point where there was no next steps, they were all blocked, and then you move to violence.
Right.
Either against others or yourself.
Right.
There's 22 veterans every day on average committing suicide now.
High numbers, yeah.
That they're more willing to engage in negotiations and again see violence as a last resort. And so I think that's the kind of impact as a culture, if it were more widespread, that we would see, is that we don't ignore the fact that we live in a dangerous world, but that we don't resort to violence without it being other efforts have been tried for negotiations. And I think I did some work I talked about before with Robert Mueller, who was the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations.
Okay.
And he wrote a book in '83 called New Genesis, Shaping a Global Spirituality. And his view was that we have the United Nations to mediate conflicts between countries, but that a lot of those conflicts have a religious base. And so if we could have a global spirituality where people look at the earth from space and understand that we're all in it together, that people move from fundamentalism to mysticism, that would be the basis for a more peaceful world, that people wouldn't have one world religion. You could have your own traditions, your own views, but you might hold them more metaphorically than literally, and you might be more sympathetic to people with other religions. And that's where I got a lot of the big picture view that working on psychedelics and consciousness change had a role to play in world peace.
We take real pride in our websites and who we work with on the show, and those are the guys at Squarespace. They've been running our website londonreal.tv and our siliconreal.com for over a year now, and they are an all-in-one platform to make it fast and easy to build your own professional website or portfolio. These guys have the tech down. It's drag and drop. It is easy. I used to run a WordPress site, and I used to have to FTP audio files and all this nonsense. And now when you see these blogs that I write every week where I talk to you about my personal impressions of the guests, I literally just bust those out, drop the picture in, boom, and it's done.